Welcome to Let the Quran Speak. I'm Aisha, your host. What does it look like when two friends from different perspectives come together to understand the Quran and Islam? We see this very relationship unfold in the book If the Oceans Were Ink, an unlikely friendship and a journey to the heart of the Quran. Carla Powers shares her studies of the Quran with Sheikh Mohammad Akram Nadwi, a scholar of Islam. This book was named a Best Book of the Year by the Washington Post. Let's sit down with Dr. Shabir Ally to get his thoughts on this book. Welcome to the show, Dr. Shabir.
Pleasure to be on.
So why did you pick up this book? Because the title seems very interesting, to say the least.
Well, to begin with, I want to thank the Ceylan Muslim Foundation for presenting me with a copy of this book, and that actually sparked my interest in it. The title is very interesting, If the Oceans Were Ink, because that comes from the 18th chapter of the Quran, saying that even if the oceans were turned into ink to write the words of God, it would not be, the words of God would not be extinguished thereby. So it's an interesting book for me from that perspective. It's subtitled, as you've already said, An Unlikely Friendship and a Journey to the Heart of the Quran. The word heart in book titles is a catcher. Publishers are using that to their advantage. Somehow it appeals to people to say we're going to the heart of the religion, in this case the heart of the book. And the author is also very interesting. Carla Powers is known for her writings in Newsweek and Time magazine and New York Times and Vogue and Glamour and so on, for those who read those. And she has also written in foreign policy. So she is well-read, published, and an interesting author in her own right. Now, the fact that she's a non-Muslim writing about Islam in a dispassionate manner, this is interesting in that nowadays she's not quite alone in that many are turning a dispassionate eye to examining Islam without the previous biases from the Middle Ages. In the Middle Ages, there were writers who wanted to depict Islam as something, being of devilish origin or something very other. But now writers are more commonly turning to describe Islam in an unbiased way, and she's one of them. A very interesting one, though, in the way in which she depicts her experience.
And what are some of the overarching themes that she covers in the book, and the way she goes about it? Because it's not your typical read, right?
Yeah, it's not a straightforward description of the faith, but it is actually you can say not one story, but two intertwined stories. One is the story of herself with her parents, the way she used to travel and live for brief periods of time in the Middle East and in other areas that have significant Muslim populations, such as India, for example. And this was facilitated by the fact that her parents were both university professors, so they had a few months of the year when they were not teaching, they could take a sojourn to places in the East, and her father had a particular liking for such travel and living among people in the East. And so that was one story, her own story, growing up as a child, often finding herself in
and is that written in like a first person? This is my journey. This is okay.
This is how I was. This is my childhood memory. This is how we were. We were in Kabul. We were, and so on. And then the other story is the story of Sheikh Mohammad Akram Nadwi, who is of India, educated at Dar al-Nadwa, a famous university in India, that trains scholars on traditional lines of Islamic jurisprudence and interpretation of the Quran and so on. But at the same time, it prepares them to have a broader sort of outlook and a forward way of thinking. So it's interesting that though with his basic traditionalism and only armed with the possibility of this kind of forward thinking, he's now thrust into Britain, where he has begun to reside, and he's teaching at Oxford University. So we have an interesting person here from the East who now comes to live in the West, whereas by contrast, Carla Powers is from the West, but she goes to live in the East.
Yeah.
So they're the two intertwined stories. Now, what happened is that Carla Power had decided that enough is enough. Too many writers like herself have focused on the events of the day and often negative stories that affect Muslims or are about Muslims. And this becomes portrayed in the modern media as though this is what Islam is. But she wanted to set the score right by studying the Quran itself, which is at the very basis of Islamic polity. And to do this, she decided to go study for a year with a Muslim scholar. And she picked this scholar, Mohammad Akram Nadwi, in the UK. To do her studies with. And she explains at length why she picked him in particular, bypassing many other important scholars, some who are in the United States of America, some others who are in Britain, and so on. And so she picked him for the fact that he has this traditionalism in his training, but at the same time that he has this sort of openness to modernity. And what she wanted to do in this year was to understand the Quran itself, but as explained by a scholar of this nature, so that she can in the end come away with the understanding that Islam is not what is being portrayed by the negative acts of a few Muslims, but here is a moderate Muslim who is well trained in his religion, and a traditional sort of training is what he has received to boot, and yet he can speak against the kind of atrocities that are committed by people who are doing violence in the name of Islam nowadays. He can speak up for women's rights and progress in modern societies.
How does the book unfold? Does she focus on specific topics and sits down and has a conversation with him, and is that how it comes off in the book, or is it more, you know, these were my discussions with him, these were the contentious topics that I wanted to explore?
Well, she's arranged them in a topical arrangement, chapter by chapter. So, for example, in one chapter she's dealing with women's rights. Another chapter she's dealing with war. Whether the discussions themselves actually followed strictly one topic after another, I didn't get that sense. Some of the discussions actually took place in a coffee shop.
Oh, okay.
And which was in a way strange, because the Sheikh himself pointed out to her that if some of his colleagues from his madrasa should see him now, here he is conversing with a woman in a coffee shop, they would be surprised, and they might wonder about his credibility or something. But that's one setting, and obviously in a setting like that, the discussion might be more freeform. The other setting is that she attended many of his classes, and this is what was unique about the book, in that, as she describes it, it was a no-holds-barred permission for her to go into the Sheikh's settings and observe firsthand what is there. So it wasn't a kind of a sanitized entry point for her. Okay, this is how much you see, and the rest is off limits. So we tell you one thing in public, but then in private we're discussing something else. No, she was privy to his classes. His discussions went on as though she wasn't there. But of course, she often intruded with her own questions in the middle of a class in which the other students were all Muslims and dedicated students of the Sheikh.
Any areas where you think it needed more strengthening? So some criticism that I found online was that, you know, it didn't explore Islamic diversity enough. The two stories, when you look at them individually and together, they weren't developed enough. What was your final takeaway on those points?
Well, I can, in fact, defend the book against both of these charges, but I mean, I may have a criticism of my own, but let's deal with these two charges. First of all, about the diversity. I think, in fact, the book has done an excellent job of mentioning diversity, because often she would mention the view of the Sheikh, which is a fairly traditional view, but then she would also mention the views of other Muslims who have written on the subject at hand. For example, when it comes to women's rights, she may be mentioning Asma Barlas, and Asma Barlas's view may not coincide with that of the Sheikh. It might be actually in contrast. She may mention, for example, Fatima Mernisi, which is definitely in contrast with the Sheikh's view. But she mentions, she brings in that diversity. And as for the two intertwined stories, I think they're you know, you would need a book on each story, and to have them both in one book, obviously you have to sacrifice something, but I think she's done an excellent job in doing it the way she has done it.
Thank you very much, Dr.
You're
Shabir.
welcome.
Hey YouTube, we hope you benefited from this video. If you liked it, or if you didn't, let us know in the comments below. And if you're interested in learning more, check out some of our other videos. And don't forget to subscribe so you can get new videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday.